and look over this fabulous group of goal-oriented, positive people, I am overwhelmed with a sense of humility. Because as I believe, we're not on earth here to see how important we can become, but instead, how much of a difference we're making in other people's lives. And are we making a difference in other people's lives? Yes. It's a room full of people that are doing that. The world tells us that we should measure our success by the amount of power and money that we have. But I know that I am surrounded by you, the Nu Skin family, who measure your success and seek your riches through service and love for one another. You know, the greatness is not found in possessions and prestige. And you have discovered, like what Steve Lund talked about, that goodness, service, and character are what we in the Nu Skin family value. I am very, very proud to be part of this Nu Skin family. These values were established by our founding members, and they've been passed down and have blossomed and solidified over the last 30 years. And at gatherings such as this, it's our opportunity to really celebrate this legacy that many of you helped build. And if you're new here, we look forward to helping you help us continue to build. So now is a good time to ask yourself as you're here today, what kind of legacy am I leaving for others to follow in my footsteps? Now, recently I read a book about an inspiring woman who had an amazing impact on the exploration and growth of the United States, a young Shoshone wife and mother who went by the name of Sacagawea. She was born in 1788, and her father was the chief of the tribe. But at the age of 12, her tribe was attacked by warring Indians, and she was kidnapped. She was taken away from her home, she was taken away from her family, and she was sold into slavery. Eventually, she caught the eye of a French trapper, French-Canadian trapper, for Canadians, and he took her for his wife. And in 1804, Lewis and Clark were commissioned by the President of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, to explore and map and find a practical route from basically the middle of the country to the West Coast. Now, realizing that they needed a guide, they were interviewing guides, and this French trapper came in and he brought his Indian wife. And they came to the decision to hire them because, well, the Indian wife was going to be a big asset. And this turned out to be one of the wisest decisions they could have ever made. She was the only woman that was in this traveling party, and she quickly gained the respect of the men. A few months into the trip, she bore a baby. So she finished this trip with a baby on her back. She was fluent in 3 languages, Shoshone, Hidatsa, and English, and she was skilled at finding plants and roots, so when the men couldn't find anything to eat from their hunting, they had food. Sacagawea was also a nurse, and she nursed many of the weak and sick men along the way that probably would have died for their ailments had it not been her uncanny ability to get them around every obstacle they met. But most importantly for this group of travelers was that Sacagawea was a symbol of peace. As the expedition made its way across the U.S., they encountered warring Indian tribes, but an expedition traveling with a woman was considered to be peaceful. So they had a very safe journey through very hazardous territory. At one point, in a very perilous boat accident, a boat capsized, and this boat had all of the scientific equipment, maps, and journals of the entire trip. All 52 of those men watched as it floated by, but what did Sacagawea do? This 110-pound woman probably handed off her baby and jumped in the water and saved all of that valuable equipment. Now, when decisions were made during this trip, she got to vote. She got to vote along with the men. And one important juncture when travel was impossible by boat, she negotiated with an Indian tribe and got them horses so that they could complete their journey by land. The success of this 2-year, over 3,000-mile expedition was due in a large fact that they'd taken Sacagawea with them. And at the end of the journey, you know what she was paid? Nothing. And when she was asked why did you sacrifice, struggle, and trudge across the continent with a band of men, she said, everything I do is for my people. She knew she was leaving a legacy, but she had no idea how big that legacy would be, because she's been recognized for her efforts. She has a river, a lake, a mountain, a U.S. Navy ship, and even a volcanic formation in Venus named after her. And she's been immortalized on a U.S. dollar coin. Now, this is amazing recognition given hundreds of years later to this smart and strong trailblazer. But now, I'd like to tell you about another woman a little closer to me, who was also a trailblazer, one of my trailblazers. My grandmother, Therese Sim, was born in a farm in Austria in 1862, and her mother died when she was 4 years old. And she had to go work on the family farm. And she never was able to go to school. She never even attended a day of school. And but at the age of 15, she was offered the opportunity to leave Austria and travel to America. Now, she saw this as a way out of her dismal situation, and she jumped at the chance to improve her own life. So, at the age of 15, she left all that she was familiar with, and she traveled all alone, boarded a train, boarded another train, got on a boat, came to America. She disembarked in Ellis Island in New York, and she didn't know how to read, she didn't know how to write, and she only knew 4 words of English. Can you imagine how frightening this was for this young girl to be in this big, giant city? Well, it didn't look like that. Well, probably did, actually. Yeah, maybe. She soon settled into life in New York City, and she found a job in a sweatshop where she worked long hours in hot, cramped quarters, earning very little money. But eventually, she met my grandfather, who had immigrated from Germany a few years earlier, and they got married. But life didn't get easier. She soon gave birth to her first child, my Aunt Ella, and then to her first son, my father. And she did that in her home in the German section of New York City. But soon afterwards, there was an opportunity for my grandfather to own a fishing, bait, and rowboat rental business. So she picked up the family from New York City and moved them out to the Bay House, a house that was built on stilts in the middle of the water, half a mile from the shore. And living in the water like this terrified my grandmother, because neither my grandmother or my grandfather could swim. But she never let on that it was a struggle, and she gave birth to twins in that house as my father looked on from his crib. You can only imagine why he did not want to be in the room when the rest of them were born. The house had no running water or electricity, and all the groceries had to be transported by rowing that boat. Have you ever rowed a boat a half mile? It's hard. She boiled diapers, kept the oil lamps burning, drew baths, cooked for the family, made her own baby food, washed clothes on one of those scrub boards, scrubbed floors, nursed my father back to health. There wasn't any money. He had scarlet fever, and she did it with onions. Not recommending it, but that's the cure. She made giant pots of clam chowder to sell to passing fishermen, and guess what? During Prohibition, she bootlegged beer. But she made it, too. She made her own beer. She did what she needed to do to educate, feed, and clothe her family. And through all this hard, backbreaking work, she never lost the love for her children or for her gardening. Now, to create a garden when she lived in the Bay House, and I remember this, I remember visiting this, she had to row a half mile, get soil, row it back, and then use any container that she could find. And if, like, a bucket went by the Bay House, she'd say, "Sandy, get out there and get that bucket," because she wanted to fill it with dirt so she could grow something in it, because she loved flowers, and I have a a passion for those as well. Now, this was a very hard life, and as a result, my grandfather became an alcoholic. So Grandma Tessie now had to work even harder to pick up the slack. Life was never easy, but Grandma Tessie had purpose. She fiercely loved her children. She provided for them, she protected them, she nursed them through illness, she educated them, and she encouraged them in all that was good. She instilled in them the virtues of hard work, positive thinking, and integrity, and as my father remembers well, never once complained about her lot in life.